For the longest time as a kid, the classic Sonic and Mario trilogies were defined by their Genesis and NES titles. Sonic had Sonic's 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles, while Mario had his own 1, 2, and 3 to boast of. But as I learned more about their histories, both Sonic and Mario's second games became more interesting in the grand scheme of things. While Mario's second game had two entirely separate releases due to poor design and a need for some sort of Mario content to be released in the West, Sonic's second title was always intended to be a direct sequel to the first game. So why is it that there's a mainline series title tucked away in between the two best games in the original trilogy? This thing, the Sega CD. One of two significant add-ons to the Sega Genesis, this one allowing for the playing of CD-ROM based games. These could feature higher quality sprites, CD-level music, and the most common feature these games had, full motion video. Look at this horribly compressed video. Bask in the pixels and the terrible frame rate. The audio isn't half bad, but good lord the quality. My god, how dated this will be.
I kid, of course. As much as I mocked the Sega CD, it was really just an idea ahead of its time, not helped by Sega's lackluster marketing for the system and poor release strategy. Honestly, I think the system did have a lot of potential, but in the end of the day, if you don't release good games for a system, it's not going to sell, no matter how cool the idea is. So, it faded into obscurity, squandering its potential. But that potential I just mentioned was realized somewhat with the one game, Sega's very own Sonic the Hedgehog CD. You gotta love how even today, that whole naming convention of naming your game after the system with the cool new technology is still done today. Super Mario 3D Land, the new Super Mario Bros. U, Nintendo does it all the time with their new games, and, well, Sonic CD was no exception. Not even Sega can escape mascot platformer syndrome.
Development-wise, if you've seen my Sonic 2 review, imagine these events occurring somewhat congruent to those events, as this game was conceived, developed, and released at a slower speed than its Genesis brother. It's the early 90s. CD-ROMs are starting to become a popular way to store memory for video games, thanks to their higher maximum storage, granting devs the ability to make better graphics and audio for a better gaming experience. However, this newfound popularity would not become mainstream until the mid to late 90s, thanks to a few blunders on the part of Nintendo and Sega. If you've seen my Paper Mario review, you'll know that Nintendo wasn't ever able to get their initial CD project for the SNES off of the ground, resulting in a terrible Philips CDI console.
Only 4 reviews in, and I'm already able to call back to older episodes. Continuity is amazing.
While Nintendo's CD failure was undoubtedly disappointing for them, Sega was dead set on getting theirs released. This didn't mean that they were without issue themselves, though. While developing the add-on, the America division of Sega was never given a physical prototype, only the technical specs. The fear was that the American side would accidentally leak the product, which, considering gaming culture today, isn't too far-fetched. But in the 90s, where the internet wasn't a necessity to live, it understandably makes the development of games and testing for their own products harder. Even including this, when Sega of America was finally able to get working copies, more frustration presented themselves, as the add-on's audio was designed with a, quote, cheap consumer-grade audio CD drive, not a CD-ROM, and even had units bursting into flames mere months before launch. But the add-on, titled the Mega CD in Japan and Sega CD in the Americas, released on December 12th, 1991 in Japan, and October 15th, 1992 in the Americas. That same year, Sonic 2 released. On the Genesis. One would assume Sega would hope to promote their new add-on, but those plans were assigned not to the STI in America, but on the team back in Japan. Naoto Oshima, one of the original creators of our beloved Hedgehog, elected to stay behind, despite his 2 co-creators Yuji Naka and Hirokazu Yasuhara leaving to help form STI. Oshima was alone, and now responsible for Sonic's next console game, a Sega CD exclusive designed to take advantage of the CD power and sell people on the hardware. One of the first ideas was a simple enhanced port of Sonic 1 or even Sonic 2. Thankfully, that idea was quickly scrapped, and the team started on a brand new game built from the ground up. During the early stages of development, to avoid redundancy, Sonic Team and the STI kept in close communication, trying to keep their ideas separate enough to make both games worth buying. When the STI was unable to implement time travel into Sonic 2, Oshima knew that with the added horsepower of the CD, such a mechanic was now possible. The team attempted to make the effect seamless, as fast gameplay was Sonic's hallmark, but it was deemed impossible by the programming team despite Oshima's desires. In fact, in an interview by Brandon Sheffield of Gamastera, Oshima explains, "What I really wanted to do was just have this sonic boom with a flash, and have the level change on you instantly. We just couldn't manage it on the hardware though, so instead there's that sequence that plays while it's loading. I kept fighting and fighting with the programmers, but they said it just wasn't possible. If Naka was doing the programming, I think it could have been done."
To do, but honestly, it's impossible.
Yuji Naka
was able to build this
America
with a box of scraps!
Well, I'm sorry. I'm not.
Yuji Naka.
Even when separated by an ocean, the confidence these guys had in each other is heartwarming. Another goal of the team was introducing two new characters, a protagonist and antagonist respectively. The antagonist was especially important to them, as the team wanted for them to be as marketable as Dr. Robotnik himself. Kazuyuki Hoshino, the game's visual designer, was in charge of character creation. First up, Amy Rose, a pink hedgehog wearing a dress and Sonic's self-proclaimed girlfriend. One of the neat twists the team came up with when writing Amy was making her the one infatuated with Sonic, and not the other way around. Sonic often ignores Amy until push comes to shove, and is friendly with her at best in any interactions they do have. Yet another jab at the portly plumber pecking Princess Peach. Sadly, in this game, she's nothing more than a damsel in distress, which is made worse by the fact that she's responsible for her own capture. Amy didn't really catch on with fans until much later in this series, so after this game she becomes the designated girl character in any spin-offs the franchise received.
Well, that's disappointing.
But what about the antagonist? They wanted someone capable of rivaling Robotnik himself regarding marketability. No small feat. Did they do it?
All living things kneel before your master.
Metal Sonic is my favorite Sonic villain of all time. While Sonic CD wasn't my first Sonic game, this is the game that introduced this loathsome copy of the original Hedgehog, and despite having competition in the Metal copy of Sonic department, Metal has proven that with a good design and too cool attitude, you can make a mark on the franchise. Even today, when Sonic has several more strong and silent type characters, Metal stands tall and above them as the coldest and most calculated villain Sonic has ever faced. Funnily enough, when Sonic Team designed him, their goal was simply sleeker than Mecha Sonic from Sonic 2. So taking a more simplistic approach with the design, they created one of the most long-standing and iconic villains in video game history.
Strange, isn't it?
Simplicity is king sometimes. Finally, the game's soundtrack. While Masato Nakamura was busy with Sonic 2 in the States, the team back home called upon Nayafumi Hayata and Masafumi Ogata to compose the game's score. While I usually bring up the soundtrack later in the review, Sega chose to try their hand at localizing more than just text or story this time while bringing Sonic CD over to the States. Calling upon the talents of recently hired in-house musician Spencer Nielsen to rescore the entire game, Sega gave him less than a month to do so, which one would think creates a massive disparity in music quality. Surprisingly enough, both scores are of the high quality Sonic fans expect from their music. I grew up with the Western tracks on the Sonic Gems collection, but have played with both the Japanese soundtrack and the Western soundtracks enough now to enjoy both equally. Concerning the two vocal themes for the game, Sonic Boom and You Could Do Anything, affectionately dubbed Toot Toot Sonic Warrior, I prefer Sonic Boom ever so slightly, but I'd be a liar if I don't jam out to both like the absolutely rocking tracks that they are. Finally, with all of the work done, Sonic CD saw release on September 23rd, 1993 in Japan, and the 18th of October in Europe, and the 19th of November in America. The team's work was rewarded handsomely. Sonic CD was critically praised, considered the best game on the Sega CD. Even today, many will tell you that this was the reason people bought a Sega CD back then, and it shows. Lifetime, the game sold 1.5 million copies, becoming the best-selling game on the system.
You know, with the development process, it doesn't give me secondhand stress from reading about it. Sonic CD sounds like it should be an underrated gem from a long-forgotten system. Without prolonging it any further, let's journey back to the past and see what we've been missing this whole time. Wait, PS3 controller? Christian Whitehead? Okay, I guess I should cover the HD version a little bit.
So, as you can tell, this game footage is in HD widescreen. A little different from our 90s brethren, huh? Well, for this you can thank one man, the Taxman, or Christian Whitehead. Formerly a fan creator for the series, in 2009 he approached Sega with an idea to recreate Sonic CD for mobile phones. Using his retro engine, the game's numerous collision issues were fixed, it ran at a buttery smooth 60 frames per second, and the game was presented in HD widescreen. While it sounds like a simple port, this version of Sonic CD was, in fact, entirely recreated from the ground up, meaning that everything, down to the physics, were painstakingly crafted to feel like the Sega CD. In late 2011, the game released for mobile phones, PS3, and Xbox 360, with a PC version releasing in early 2012.
Now some of you might be wondering, why am I reviewing the HD version instead of the, say, original version, like I did for Sonics 1 and 2? Simply put, the cost of a Sega Genesis, Sega CD, and Sonic CD is way too expensive for me right now. Well upwards of $200 for one game on a system that I will never play otherwise? No thanks. 2, while the Sonic Gems collection exists, it's the original version of Sonic CD. Sure, it's the PC port of Sonic CD, which did improve load times somewhat, but guys, honestly, the HD version fixes a lot of the load issues, frame rate issues, and it's just gonna make this review easy for you guys to look at. I mean, I mentioned it. It's in HD widescreen. Look at that. It looks great. It's 60 frames a second consistently, I don't have to be cutting out loading times all the time, it's just gonna be better for you guys as well. Sorry to any fans of the original, but this is the version we're looking at. And without prolonging it any further, let's jump into Sonic CD, the PlayStation 3.
Regarding the Sonic timeline, this game takes place in between Sonics 1 and 2 to explain the absence of a certain two-tailed fox. Once a year, Little Planet comes to hover over Neverlake in a display of the planet's natural beauty. Beauty so incredible that it is believed time flows differently there, as entire environments will change in the blink of an eye with no explanation. That is until Dr. Robotnik discovers the Time Stones and their power to warp and bend time on the planet. Using the stones to his advantage, the mad genius captures them all and, using his newest creations, heads into the past of Little Planet to slowly but surely mold the planet into his own image. As luck would have it though, Sonic was one day journeying to Neverlake to see the Little Planet. Faster than you could say,
"That's no moon. It's a space station."
Sonic realizes what's happened and quickly rushes to figure out how to stop the Doctor's mechanical machinations. But that's not all. While journeying, Sonic runs into Amy Rose, his biggest fangirl and self-proclaimed girlfriend. Her reason for being here? One day, while playing with her tarot cards to look into the future, yes, I'm serious, she learns she's destined to meet with Sonic at Neverlake. Taking the initiative, she arrives to Neverlake before Sonic and heads up to Little Planet, knowing that's where he's most likely to end up. Sonic is none too pleased with her appearance, but tolerates it, not realizing Dr. Robotnik was about to make things a whole lot harder for the both of them. In the outskirts of collision chaos, while Sonic attempts to ditch Amy, he hears a scream. It's Amy, and she's been taken by a new robotic doppelganger of Sonic. While Sonic may not enjoy her company, he's not one to allow innocent life to be taken either. Now tasked with saving Little Planet and Amy, Sonic races through time to stop threats old and new. Gameplay-wise, we're looking at Sonic stuck between his clunky Sonic 1 appearance and much smoother Sonic 2 appearance. He controls the same as in both games, but he does have his spin dash, albeit neutered heavily. In Sonic CD, you need to wait for at least a second to charge up the spin, which isn't detrimental by any means, but it defeats the purpose of the dash. In Sonic 2 and onwards, the spin dash can be applied almost instantaneously, making for an excellent boosting tool. In this game, it's been shoved to the side for a new move, the Super Peel Out. Just hold up, press the jump button a few times, and Sonic's feet create a figure-8 motion that sends him barreling forward. As a kid, I loved this move, it looked amazing, and the comic Sonic used it a bunch. But nowadays, I almost never use it as intended. Instead of merely running ahead, I curl into a ball in a sort of pseudo-spin dash to prevent being damaged by enemies. It's the best I'll get with this weird spin dash at least. Side note, in the HD version of the game, you can choose the superior Sonic 2 spin dash, all but removing the need for the super peel out. Thanks, Taxman! Another new mechanic is time travel. In this game, there are 2 posts scattered numerous times throughout the levels, past and future. I'm going to tell you right now, avoid the future signs like the plague. They do nothing for you and only serve to halt and annoy you. Past signs, on the other hand, are your best friend. They love you. They want to see you succeed. Pay off your student debts, get a job, a house, maybe a nice loving family. Okay, maybe perhaps I'm projecting a bit here. But by picking up max speed and running consistently, Sonic will tap into the Speed Force and head into the past, allowing him to search and destroy 2 things. Metal Sonic projectors, which don't count towards actual progress, but make animals appear in the rest of the level, which is kinda nice. But what you really want is the robot generator. By destroying each one in every level, Sonic creates good futures for the Act and Zone, which then ruins things for Robotnik. With 7 zones, 21 acts, and 14 of those acts housing generators, Sonic has his work cut out for him if he wants to save Little Planet. Now, let's talk levels. As mentioned above, this game goes back to the 3-act per zone variety, but thankfully I don't mind it as much here. The 3rd act is a microscopic level that leads up to the boss, which then eats up the most time in the act, making for a more exciting level than Green Hill Zone for the 3rd time. Without further ado, let's see how Sonic CD stacks up to its cartridge compadres. Palm Tree Panic. Colorful, and fairly vertical, which starts the trend for this game nicely. It's basically Green Hill Zone if someone turned the saturation way up and gave Sonic more room to maneuver. Music-wise, it's fine, but definitely my least favorite intro stage of the 3 stages so far. That's not to say it's terrible. It does an excellent job of introducing the game mechanics and not alienating the player, but I just think the level could have been more interesting instead of generic Green Hill area yet again. Collision Chaos. Quick question to anyone who's played this game. Who ran into the spikes at the beginning of the stage and died their first time here? Not just me? Okay, good. Anyways, this stage is where Metal Sonic nabs Amy, and the adventure really takes off. I wish. While the music is absolutely jamming in the Japanese version, the stage itself is kind of annoying to traverse. While not a pinball or casino stage in name, Chaos is right, because Sonic will be bouncing here more than a kid on a 2-liter soda. Springs and flippers are the names of the game here, and it's how Sonic will be getting through the majority of this level. Graphics-wise, it's an odd color choice of pink and blue that doesn't make for the most appealing stage to look at while bouncing around. Honestly, if it weren't for the music and the fact that I can at least pick up some speed, I would rank this below Marble Zone in Sonic 1.
Boy, being more negative than usual with these first 2 zones. It's kinda new for this channel. It feels kinda weird, you know? Well, you know what? 3rd time's the charm. Maybe this zone can...
Titled Tempest Zone.
A water level.
Wait, come back! It's actually good.
I don't care if it's in 60 frames a second. I'm not playing a Sonic water level.
Okay. While I recover, I'll put any worries to rest. Yes, this is the water level of Sonic CD, and it's the first level I like going through entirely in this game. Music in both the English and Japanese versions are spectacular in their own rights, and the level design itself both promotes speed and exploration without being obnoxiously obtuse in its structure. Just keep moving and you'll either surface and find a place to time travel, or an air bubble to continue your trek. Even better, the graphics complement the music, with an absolutely amazing color palette that reminds me of a marble pool or aquarium. And unlike Aquatic Ruin, you'll have to touch the water here, so I consider this a better water level on the grounds that the water is actually mandatory this time around. Quartz Quadrant. More fun! Despite the name, this stage is anything but rocky. With lots of conveyor belts and pipes to use as stepping stones, Sonic will need to be bolder if he hopes to make it through here in one piece. Don't take this stage for granted. With 2 more great tracks for the OST, it's crystal clear. This stage simply rocks. Wacky Workbench. So much bouncing. So vertical. Okay, it's not that bad, but this stage doesn't promote the signature speed of the series in a meaningful way. Since the goal of each stage is to go to the past and search for robot generators, Wacky Workbench fails on the account that not only is the search a pain in the rear, but even trying to beat the level quickly is a pain due to the constant insane bouncing and the annoying enemy placement. And this is the stage where I prefer the US soundtrack for the first time over the Japanese. only by a hair though. Both tracks are great, but the American track has a bounce to it that I find more appropriate for a stage like this. Stardust Speedway. Hello, poster child for this game. And for good reason. This stage is full of greasy fast speed with a great visual aesthetic and music that works well in both versions of the game. Of course, why people remember this stage so fondly is both the sheer quality of the level design, and also the boss fight in the stage. Metal Sonic finally appears to challenge you to a race. To the death, of course. While it seems to be a straightforward race with spike obstacles and Metal Sonic occasionally attacking you, if you're going too slow, Sonic will be attacked by Dr. Robotnik with an insta-kill laser. Even if you have rings, his laser ends you. Now of course, one would ask, why doesn't he use this invention more often after this? And to that, I simply point you towards this clip.
That was all part of my plan, part of the big picture. Where's the fun in having my plan succeed without any challenge?
Once Sonic beats his Cobalt counterfeit,
Some would say I'm the reverse.
he saves Amy and gets ready to end Robotnik once and for all. Metallic Madness Zone. Similar to Metropolis Zone in graphical style, but more unique in the gadgets and obstacles Sonic has to blaze through. From plane shifting, buzzsaws, shrinking and growing, to much, much more. Sonic will be going up and down and all around when it comes to this stage. Music-wise, both tracks are again brilliant pieces, making for an excellent final stage and my personal favorite of all of the final stages we've played so far. While I've already discussed the Metal Sonic boss fight, I neglected to mention the other boss fights in this game. Robotnik's first machine is absolutely pathetic, which does not inspire confidence at all. But every other boss fight in the game is actually a unique and different fight that will test a player's ability to maneuver Sonic properly and hit Robotnik. Every battle isn't decided in 8 hits anymore. Instead, it's a matter of Sonic either reaching him or hitting him with a couple of times, spread out enough to make the fight interesting anyways. Personal favorites include the Quartz Quadrant boss for being a creative use of Sonic's speed, and Wacky Workbench for having a neat magnet gimmick implemented. But now, we reach the final boss. Robotnik isn't using his Megazord, instead opting to use his Eggmobile surrounded by metal fins of all things. While getting the first hit is somewhat of a nightmare, after that the boss becomes relatively simple, only taking 4 hits down. Once you've beaten him, Sonic escapes with Amy in tow, and depending on if you destroy the generators or not, Little Planet is restored to its natural state, or appears back in the sky with its mechanical appearance and chain yet again. Now before I head into alternate means on how to get the best ending, let's talk about these robot generators and the trouble they cause by merely existing. Not in story, but in gameplay. Sonic's gameplay has always been focused around speed. Speed is key. Without speed, he is no different from any other mascot platformer. So when the time travel gimmick is promoted as something that requires speed, one would think that it makes for cool and varied level design. But it more serves as a way to annoy the player for multiple reasons. As previously mentioned, Sonic needs to pick up a lot of speed and keep it up for a consistent amount of time if he hopes to travel back in time. In a game like Sonic 2, this would be achievable with basic application of Sonic's skills and abilities. The level design was very long and narrow, with only 2 or 3 general pathways that all converged on a single endpoint. In Sonic CD, the pathway mentality is still there, but the level design is now tall and vertical, and the game doesn't compensate. If a player wants to time travel correctly, you need to memorize the level design, hope the wonky collision detection doesn't screw you over in the older versions, and in the HD version, you need to keep up the speed for even longer, which causes some path signs to be less useful than previously. This is already a recipe for annoyance, but it gets better! If you travel to the past and accidentally pass certain places in the level, you can't head back. At all. In the older versions of the game, this meant a dead run. You couldn't get the generator and might as well restart or try an alternate method of 100%. Whoever thought that basing Sonic platforming on exploration with areas that lock behind the player should be smacked. It's silly to think that a first-time player would know to even look for a robot generator without a guide, and even if they did, generators get pretty well hidden by the late game. As a kid, I was never able to find them all, and even now, I choose to use the alternative method when it comes to beating this game. Now that I've spoken enough about it though, what is the alternative method for beating this game at 100%? The Time Stones! No, not the Chaos Emeralds. These guys are functionally the same, but they don't allow for Supersonic, which makes them objectively lamer from a gameplay standpoint. This game uses the old Sonic 1 method of reaching the special stages, collecting 50 rings, reaching the end of the stage, and jumping into the giant ring at the end. Once this is done, the real power of the Sega CD is unleashed. Sonic is put into an obstacle course with 6 UFOs he must destroy by jumping into them within 100 seconds. Collect all 7 stones, and you can create a good ending for every zone and have 100% of the game without the need for breaking any generators. Sounds easy enough, but just like the other special stages, these are on rails. You control Sonic from a behind-the-back perspective, and he is always running forward. His turns are somewhat slippery and require some getting used to before you can master them. What really causes issues in these stages is the eventual overwhelming amount of speed Sonic picks up, whether it be through not hitting any obstacles or gaining speed shoes. Sonic will sometimes uncontrollably barrel into springs that fling him sky high, floor grinders to completely halt and trip Sonic, wasting time, or into the water surrounding the platforms, which rapidly reduce the time a player has left in a special stage. Run out of time without having beaten the UFOs, and you're kicked from the stage. Thankfully, there are 3 ways to mitigate this. My personal favorite is holding back on the D-pad. This slows Sonic's run to a crawl and allows for very accurate jumps without risking landing on anything harmful. Second, every time the timer hits 20 seconds left, a blue UFO appears in the center of the area. If Sonic hits it, it grants an additional 30 seconds. You can do this as many times as you need, meaning you can theoretically spend eternity in these special stages. Finally, realizing the UFOs all have patterns. This sounds fairly obvious, but if you go through the stages for the first time jumping without thought and attempting to brute force them, you'll end up missing a few UFOs and looking foolish. But by doing the first 2 tips I mentioned and approaching the ships with caution, you'll notice they often have 3 points they always travel between. Use this to your advantage. By cutting ships off and jumping into their path, or directly approaching and jumping with good timing, these special stages are significantly more fun, exciting, and
I think it's time we just wrap things up. I mean, how in the world could I possibly continue from that? Now that we've discussed everything, it's time for a verdict. Does Sonic CD stand in line with its Genesis counterparts? Can we consider it among the upper echelon of Sonic games? The original version... maybe? I mean, if you like it, that's fine. But personally, it's okay, it's serviceable. I would argue that, personally, I think it's on par with Sonic 1. Interchangeable, really. There's just too many things that really anger or annoy me in the original version of the game to give me the recommendation, at least. I would not personally tell someone, go play Sonic CD on the Sega CD or Gems collection. It's just a little bit too rough around the edges. But this HD port, yes, play it. If you are interested in Sonic, or if you're a Sonic fan that's never played it, get it. It's on Steam, it's on PS3, Xbox 360, or if you have to, your mobile phone, because this is the version that has all the love and care and touch-ups required to make an otherwise okay game much more playable and enjoyable for anyone. The ease of access alone makes this much more worth it than the original version on Sega CD.
Sonic CD on the Sega CD was riddled with minor issues that, when compacted, create an experience of annoyance that just bogged down the overall game. But Christian Whitehead and Sega were able to take the good of Sonic CD and make it better, enough so where I can firmly recommend the remake over the original Sonic 1. If you want to play the original, go right ahead, but I recommend the Sonic Gems port of it. It's cheaper to come by and is a port of the original PC version of Sonic CD, sporting faster load times and slight improvements. It's no HD remake, but it's a serviceable version of the original. While Sonic CD may not be the favorite of many or even an underappreciated classic, with a new and improved version on modern systems, I think the game has been elevated to a status many could consider on par with the original classic titles. Also, one last thing, by beating this game in the HD version, you can play as Tails. He plays exactly the same as he does in the classic games, making the vertical level design less of a pain with his flight power. He can even go through the special stages, meaning this team went through and created all new sprites for a completion bonus mode. That is dedication, and all the more reason to buy this version. Now, if only Sega would release an HD mobile port of Sonic's 1 and 2 to console or PC. Guys, please, I'd enjoy Sonic 1 so much more with widescreen and a controller in my hand. Please, I'm begging you, PS4 release, or Switch, 2019, let's do it.
And with Sonic CD fully covered, we only have one more game left to cover. We're heading back to the Genesis for this one, or my Nintendo Wii Virtual Console, but it's Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the grand finale to Sonic's 16-bit roots. Now, if you stuck around until the end of this review, I want to thank you very much. It greatly warms my heart that you enjoyed it so much that you stuck around. If you have a personal story or comment you want to say about Sonic CD, please leave it in the comments down below. I'm always reading and love hearing from you guys. And just remember, be nice to each other, have a fantastic night, and I will see you guys in the next review. Ciao.
Save the planet from disaster.